I'm going to be teaching my son how to drive. So I thought I'd just have him watch a bunch of Fast and the Furious movies as training. What do you think? Good idea? Bad idea? Terrible idea. So, what about you learning to do real estate investing? Would you watch the equivalent of the Fast and the Furious on social media to train yourself in real estate investing? Also, terrible idea. Please join Kristi, Kandel, and I as we talk about hyper reality. It's the fuzzy line between what's real and what's not real, and how if we can't take those things apart and deal with reality, we are preparing for a tragic end. And unfortunately, there's no stuntman play in your life. Please join Kristi and I as we talk about hyper reality on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast. Good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing.
Welcome to the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing. I'm one of your co-hosts, Kristi Kandel. I'm a real estate developer, investor, and I teach locals how to become a real estate developer in their own backyard. Today, I have Erik with me, and we have a really interesting topic.
We do. We are going to get a little bit philosophical. I don't know if this is really so much philosophy. It kind of is. Our topic today is hyper reality. And when I mentioned that to Kristi, she's like, so what? And I was driving the other day, and my wife was asking, like, so what are you guys going to record about? I said, hyper reality. And she said, okay, first of all, what is that? And so I'm going to read a definition to you of what hyper reality is, because I want to get it just right, okay? Because this is really important. Hyper reality is a term coined by Jean Baudrillard. I probably murdered his name, but we're going to stick with that. It refers to a state where the distinction between reality and simulation becomes blurred. This is the key part, leading people to perceive representations or fabricated realities as more real than reality itself. It's characterized by the blending of physical reality with virtual or artificial constructs, often driven by media technology and consumer culture. Wow. Okay. What does that even mean? So break it down. I asked AI to give me 5 specific examples of what this could mean in life for you and me. 1, artificial sweeteners. It's sweeter than actual sweetness, but it's kind of not real. It is real, but it's not real. See, it's kind of blurs that line between what's real and what's not real. Plastic surgery, right? It's like, well, it's kind of real, but it's also kind of not real. I remember watching a guy, he had done, I'd never heard of this before, calf implants. Like he had little plastic
I just
things.
heard of that recently, and I was like, really? Calves?
Right? I know. And the guy's walking on the beach and he's like showing girls his calves and they're looking at him. Let's just say it was probably not the reaction he was looking for. Okay.
Like he's crazy.
There you go. Plastic surgery. And we don't have to go too far to think of all the places we're doing that. Okay, just a side little thing here. I was walking through the airport one day and looked up and I saw somebody. There was a woman. She was checking her phone. She was dressed really sharp, right? And I was like, wow, she is really dressed. And then her lips were stuck in a permanent duck lip. It was beyond, I mean, it was the most I have ever seen. It was like she'd gotten stuck in a vacuum cleaner. It was frightening. And it was minutes later, my wife turned to me and said, did you see? I said, yeah, I can't unsee that. Wow. Okay, so we're going there. Hyper reality. Are they real? Are they not real? I can't make that judgment call. Here's another thing, theme parks. Yeah, a place like Disney World simulate fantastical environments that feel more immersive and real than real landscapes. Okay, there you go. Social media filters. Okay, it's the real person, but is that their real complexion? Is that their real color? Is that their real, and we go on
Why
and on.
is their skin so beautiful? Why is this? Why is that? Oh, because it's not real.
And then we dip into food. And this gives an example of GMOs, which is one thing, but just even if it's not genetically modified, we have food scientists who spend their entire career trying to make food look more attractive to us, to hit all of our buttons that make us crave more and more and more of it. And it's real, but it's not real, right? It's not the kind of thing that my grandparents would have recognized as regular food. So those are some of the examples of hyper reality. Now, after going through a shorter definition of that with my wife, she, of course, asked, what does that have to do with real estate? Why are you doing that on your podcast? So Kristi and I are going to kind of bounce back and forth here with some ways that this shows up. Now, It shows up from a podcast guest. Here's our next guest, so-and-so. Hey, 3 years ago, didn't know anything about real estate. Now he's got a $30 million portfolio. Let's welcome our guest. And we're like, wow, like that seems like amazing.
On one hand, it's like, that's incredible. I didn't even know that was possible. Now I have something else to shoot for.
But that guy is now awaiting a sentencing for federal prison because that was hyper reality by a different means. We did another podcast about that. So another example of this, let's just be honest, is the social media feeds of, let's just say, some gurus. I'll admit, I think about, what am I going to post? And we all do. This isn't about good or evil. Okay, I want to make that really clear here. Where we're talking about hyper reality, this is where we live. There's an expression that I heard. It took a while for it to soak in. I'm embarrassed to say it took longer than it should have. But fish are the last to discover water, right? They're just in it, and it's all around, and it seems so obvious to anyone else. But if you're in it, you can't see it. You don't know that's what you're in. And I think we are all in a state of hyper reality. Kristi, what are some other ways that you see hyper reality in real estate investing?
I'll see people and I'll talk to them and they'll say, "Oh, I've built this massive flipping company and we flip, I don't know, 50 properties a year and we've got all the companies associated with that." Well, why did you do that? Like, is that actually what you wanted? Oh, I was told I was supposed to do more and more and more. And I keep seeing people doing it, so I just did it. Okay, cool. Do you enjoy your day? Do you have fun in it? No, I'm freaking grinding 12-hour days, never get to see my family. It's like, whoa, seriously. And we never take the time then to pause and see, but because we think we're supposed to grind on the hamster wheel, we just keep going. The same way, I've got a company that I'm looking to partner with, and his biggest challenge right now is he's working 7 days a week and never gets to see his family, but he's realizing, wait, there's more to this. I thought this was the end goal, and it's not.
There we go. Is it that I thought this, but that? And this is kind of why we're talking about this idea of hyper reality. There's an example of that. I remember when I was a teenager, the idea of getting a truck, like a 4-wheel drive truck. Like my dream truck, the ultimate truck, was probably the Toyota that was in Back to the Future. The garage door opens up and here's this 4x4 Toyota Tacoma. I mean, it wasn't a Tacoma, it's just a Toyota, right? And that was amazing. Nowadays, we got trucks 4 times that size on the road around me all the time. I mean, the tires are taller than the door. I've seen trucks around here where you have to literally have a ladder to get into it, right? So our ideas of what it needs to be, we took one thing, like, yeah, but I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to make it bigger. I saw a truck the other day that had 8 headlights. Who needs 8 headlights on your truck? It's because it's 4 times cooler than the person who has only 2 headlights, right? It's just like, I'm going to see that and raise you 2 headlights. Oh yeah, well, I'm going to do ground effects, on my truck, and that's going to be. So we're building, and sometimes we don't stop and say, well, why? And that creates a problem for us with the results. So we see these curated social media feeds. We hear I have 1,100 doors, and we're like, well, how true is that? I remember sitting at a workshop and somebody raised their hand to ask a question. They prefaced it with, "Excuse me, I have 1,100 doors and I blah, 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 blah." Well, first of all, why did that have to even be said? Second, a person I was sitting next to, a friend of mine, turned and said, "Yeah, she's in the same syndication I am. She does not own 1,100 doors." Yeah. So in a way, that hyper reality, it is true. If you're in a syndication and that syndication owns 1,100 doors, well, you kind of do, but also you kind of don't. And so this puts us in this weird kind of between reality and between fantasy, and that results in a bunch of different stuff. Kristi, what are some of the results, the upshot of that? You mentioned one. It's like, we can get to a destination, and I want you to share your story here of your kind of almost a hyper reality dream And then what happened?
Growing up, we did not have a lot of money. And between watching shows and reading all the books, I thought that living on an island one day would be so awesome. And I love dolphins and dogs. Wouldn't it be cool if I lived on an island? I had this dock where I could go out in the morning and have coffee, at night have wine. My dog's beside me, and I've got a wild pet dolphin that just comes up and says, "Hey, yo." So I made that my big BHAG goal, the big, wild, hairy, audacious goal, because I wanted to shoot for what looked like ultimate success. If I got that, that is success. Fast forward, I bought the house on the island with the dock. And freaking one night shortly after at sunset, a dolphin comes by while we're sitting on the end of the dock. And I'm just like, whoa, that just came true. And at the same time, very shortly after, you realize very quickly, this was a great goal. This didn't fill me up inside. I still have the same things that I need to work out. And very quickly that illusion of what was there starts to unravel, because that wasn't actually what it was meant to be. Because that dream focused on me and an outcome that I thought I wanted. When in reality, it took me away from being a destination person to becoming a journey person, and realizing that it's the path, it's the struggle, it's the ups and the downs along the way that are truly what's important. It's the building of something new and having no idea what the outcome is, but building it with the people that are around you and focusing on relationships, connection, and collaborations. Now I have completely changed my new goals and my future goals to solely focus around building things around amazing people and community, and enjoying every bit of every day, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. And this is, I want to dig in a little bit to Kristi's story here. There are two parts to it. Oh, there's a lot of parts to it because everything's complicated, right? But one of the metaphors that I find really fascinating is launching rockets. And I heard somebody mention that, depending on the rocket, but I'll use Saturn V as an example. Saturn V used 85% of all of its fuel just to escape Earth's gravity, right? So that just getting, we're headed to the moon here, right? It's a long ways. And then you've got to navigate the whole thing. And then you've got to make it back. And you got to have just enough reserves, just to make, a few little adjustments. But they use over 85% of their fuel just to escape Earth's gravity. So there's the launching phase of our lives. And sometimes that can be fueled by and motivated by the big dreams, the big, hairy, audacious dream of a house on an island with a dog and a boat and the dolphin coming by. And so we're like, okay, we got to do, what do we have to do to get out of here? And you burn a lot of fuel. I think it's important to recognize that that is a thing. There is a stage at which you will be burning a lot of fuel. You've got to escape the velocity of the gravity, of wherever you are. Kristi had to do that. I had to escape the gravity of my fee for service. It's just, I go in and I do the thing that I do, and they pay me the money by the hour or the day for what it is that I do. It took a lot of courage and inspiration and dealing with fears to get past that. But once we escape that gravity, if we burn fuel at that same speed, we are crazy erratic and we are out of control, right? And so there's a time where we say, okay, we got to throttle back here a little bit and figure out, where am I going? What's real? How do I figure out what's real? And where am I going to go? This hyper reality thing, dealing with the fine fuzzy edge of where we are in reality and where we want to be, and what's a fictitious made up thing, and what it is that we want for ourselves and what's real, it gets kind of fuzzy. And the reason we're talking about this, instead of just a tactical, here's how you buy your first short-term rental, is because Kristi and I both know that even if you're successful in that, if you haven't thought about these other things, you will be adrift. If you keep your throttle on the same way it took to get that escape velocity, you will miss your destination.
And I think it's especially important now in the age of technology and AI and agents, because I was just listening to Cody Sanchez's podcast. He was an AI expert, creates the AI clones of people. And, the title was Automate or Be Automated. And in the same time, that means that there's going to be mass creation at mass scale for very little money. So there's going to be tons of what looks good and what looks shiny and what looks like you're supposed to be doing out there, that if you don't have a strong enough foundation, if your why isn't strong enough, you are going to really, really struggle in the years ahead.
Yep, 100%. I thought about back in the days when I lived in Florida, and we took a boat out with a friend. We were going to do some scuba diving. And I asked him, like, how the heck do you know where you are? Right? You're in the ocean. There's no landmarks. And this was before satellite navigation was common. And he said, well, I have a LORAN system, LORAN. It just stands for long range navigation. And it used radio signals. It was the most basic form of triangulation. We use it now with our cell phones all the time, right? You can turn on your cell phone on Google Maps and it'll tell you basically what room you're in, right, in your house, because it's using signals from more than one place. And this is really important, is you have to send a signal out to one location. Okay, that's kind of where I am relative to them. Then you have to send out a different one to a different location. Here's where I am relative to them. And the more points of contact you have, the better idea you have of where you actually are. Now, you have to know or do your due diligence to know if those places you're getting your signals from are real, right? And this is what Kristi's talking about, is that with the proliferation of AI and with filters on Instagram, and look, guess what? All it takes to make $1 million on social media is your thumbs and a long enough to say, I just made $1 million. That's it.
Magic, you made it. Everyone believes it now and feels inferior.
That's it. That's it. See, because if nobody vets that, and scary thing is that very few people do very little vetting of the people who show up on podcasts and so on, you don't know what's real and what's not real. You're seeing just one slice of their life. And even if that slice that you see is 100% real and honest and genuine, and I want to believe that most people are, right? But we're only seeing one little slice of their life.
Well, and it could also mean I just made $1 million. Sure, you grossed $1 million, but you had a 5% margin on that. So what you actually put in your pocket was not $1 million.
So this is what we're talking about, is that we need to do a good job of saying, first of all, where am I in reality? And where do I want to be? Those are different questions, but they're really important. And if we get our signals mixed up and we're taking triangulation points of where am I from a signal that's not real, or we misunderstand, or we did another podcast about that. But it puts us in a weird way. If we think, well, I talked to a young woman a week or two ago who was just so like, hey, what do you think about this as a potential property? Could you take a look at this and help me analyze the thing? I really want to do this. I feel like I've got to get started. I just need to own more. And I just feel like I'm totally behind. I said, well, okay, what's that? And it's like, well, here's this property in Florida. I said, wait. So wait a minute. You already own one home and you're house hacking, making money on that. And you own what's basically a tiny home and still trying to get to a solution on that kind of a thing. And you just turned 21. You're not behind.
You're winning.
Right?
You're winning.
Yeah. But you see, this hyper reality kind of a thing would make somebody believe it's like, well, yeah, but that person over there has got 21 doors and they're only 23 years old. Yes and no. They've got a little syndication going on and they actually own, just they're the GP, didn't put any money. And so they've got their GP fees. And if that portfolio makes money, they'll make money. And if it doesn't, they got nothing. So that's the results of this, is we get an unreal version of reality. And that's really dangerous. I did a workshop once years ago, and it was on pornography awareness. It's just like, hey, what is it? What's it doing to our lives? Short version, it's not good. And it's not for the puritanical reasons of it's dirty. It's like, it just messes up everybody. Okay. But I brought in a sexologist. I didn't know that was a thing. She's a PhD sexologist. I was like, wow, okay. So she presented, and she had a line in her presentation that I thought was really fascinating. She said, look, learning about sex from porn is like learning how to drive by watching The Fast and the Furious. Like, that's not real. Like, just none of that's real. They're not in those cars. That background is not real. That jump wasn't real. The whole thing isn't real, but we're watching it and I'm like, oh, wow, that's going on. But here's my point with that. And I wrote it down so I could really summarize it here. If we train ourselves to deal with reality by absorbing what is not reality, we are poorly prepared to deal with reality. And this is the whole problem of hyper reality, right? If I have carrots sitting on the counter and I have Cheetos, they're both orange, right? But one of them is not real. And one of those, if I take a bite and I eat, a little bit of it, oh, like, okay, that's all right. And the other one, like, oh, more, 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 more. Well,
Mhm.
you know which one it is. And one of those was engineered to give me this
Mhm.
reaction so that I buy more of it. So, Kristi, we're saturated with this hyper reality all around us in our lives and in real estate investing. It can give us kind of this feeling of like, oh man, I'm behind. I want to be somewhere where I'm not, and where we want to be may or may not be real. How do we get our tires back on the road here?
What I find helpful is to pause, be present, and give myself the space to get clear internally. What do I actually want? I was mentoring someone last week and it broke my heart because she wanted to start businesses. She didn't know what type of business to start and we were brainstorming. And I was like, "Okay, well what are your interests?" And got nothing. "Okay, well what makes you happy? What about this?" She's like, "I don't know." Okay. If money was no object, what would you do in an ideal day? Where would you be in the world? What would you do? Beaches, mountains? She couldn't figure out a response to that. And I think we're so busy in life, just plowing ahead or being stuck in whatever rut we're in, that being alone with ourselves is scary. And we don't do it. So we always have some noise on in the background, or we're always around people. And if we don't take the time to pause and get to know ourselves, then we will get lost into this hyper reality. I literally have calendar invites. I have tasks show up in my CRM. I have habits on my tracker to say, hey, did you do your meditation today? Hey, did you take the time to do this manifestation? Whatever it is that I want to focus on. But then also when I'm engaging with other people, uh, I'm looking for that deeper level of connection, not the surface conversations. I'm
Mm,
looking for who are you actually as a person because I actually care, and taking it one step further and showing that I care about that person. And then you start to have conversations that open you both up. The more authenticity, the more real conversations, the more getting clear with yourself and what you truly want and need out of life. Those are very helpful to me. It is not second nature. It is a practice that you work on and you get better and better at.
yes, it's funny. Kristi kind of put together an outline for this podcast on her own, and due to my lack of tech or lack of synchronization between devices, I'll blame it on that. I wasn't able to really review much of what she came up with, and nor could she see mine. And yet we looked at this topic and said, yeah, we pretty much overlap almost entirely here. One of the first things that I put down as an antidote to this hyper reality is just what Kristi said, is friends, real people. The shorthand for that is IRL. I was like, the first time I saw that, I was like, what is IRL? It stands for in real life. Friends, we are in a place and time where we need to say in real life. Like, man, when I was growing up, there only was in real life. Okay. there was there were the actors on the tube TV, and I knew that was acting, right? There was no assumption that that was real. But now we can't tell. And so one of the most important ways to deal with this hyper reality is real friends in real life, in real time, being there, being present. And this is why real relationships are so much messier than simulated ones, but they're also so much more rewarding. When you've got a mentor or a friend who tells you, it's like, ugh, this is going pretty badly for me right now. And you can listen to that and they can say that. Then you understand when your life hits a bump, when you've got trouble, that happens, right? So if you're only ingesting curated social media feeds, it would be really easy to think that everybody else has got it together and they're way ahead of you. And the reality is not that. Whether that was intentional or not is kind of beside the point. It still leaves you with the impression that you're behind, that you're not enough, etc. I think one of the other antidotes is nature,
Mm-hmm.
is it's being out in nature. Because, okay, to Kristi's thing, being down in Florida, I was in Florida. I had a small boat. My wife insisted it was a raft. I maintain it was a boat, although it did have inflatable sides. But
Small
I
craft.
loved it. Was a small craft. It was a small craft, but it had fiberglass hull. So I'm going to say that, and a remote steering station. I didn't have to sit back at the tiller. So it was kind of a blend between a real boat and a raft, to be true. But I love going out in that. But here's the thing about going out in nature. Sometimes it's rough. Sometimes the waves are big. Sometimes it's rainy. Sometimes you get a headwind. Sometimes it's unbelievably beautiful. And you're like, this is incredible. This is so amazing. But being in nature, being in the ultimate reality of that just tells you, yeah, sometimes it's up and sometimes it's down. Sometimes the wind is at your back. Sometimes it's a headwind, with rain. And the more you experience that and recognize this is where I am and this is real, I think the more and the better equipped we are to deal with real life.
Comments on that. They also say in Alaska, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad gear, which is very true. But then also, when you're out there in those conditions and you realize you can't control the wind, the rain, the surge,
Right.
the waves, then you realize the one thing you can control is your response to what is happening.
Yes.
And you can fold and go, oh, this is it. This is over. This is the worst or terrible. Or you can put the right gear on and you can say, I'm going to enjoy the heck out of this. And even though it's freezing or pouring rain, I'm still going to go on this kayaking adventure and climb this mountain and do whatever random stuff. When we stop trying to control and keep up with the Joneses and focusing on outcomes as opposed to inputs, like we talked about in the last pod, that's going to then take us down a bad or a negative cycle.
Right. One of the words that Kristi's used, and I've used it too, well, she used it first, is practice. Practice this. It seems so strange. Like, well, shouldn't we be talking about how to take down a small multifamily? Sure. Guess what? You can find that out. You can find a book. You can find a podcast that'll tell you how to do that and analyze that. But if you have to know that that's real, and you have to know that that's what you really want on the other side of it, and that you're not pursuing some hyper real goal that's not really your goal, or it's not a real destination at all. Whatever those things are, you've got to be grounded in reality right there. This is a practice. And maybe it's a spiritual practice. Maybe it is prayer or meditation or whatever those types of things are that are somewhat introspective. I think there's a place also for focusing outwards, and that may be through anything that helps you practice and develop delayed gratification. That may be gardening, because guess what? If I love heirloom tomatoes, there's just nothing like an actual one of those weird, lumpy, funny colored tomatoes that does not look like a supermarket tomato, which, by the way, is hyper reality. They the way they package them, the way they show them, and you eat them, and you're like, what did that even taste like? Not much is what it tasted like. That's a tomato in the winter, right? But if you get a summertime heirloom tomato, and you have that, it is mind blowing. It's amazing, right? That's just like, oh, that's incredible. But guess what? As much as I like an heirloom tomato, I can't stick one in the ground and get one tomorrow. I just can't. Social media or AI or any of other things could generate a tomato for me within 2 minutes, 30 seconds, right? But that's not a real tomato. And I think that nature and practicing slow things helps us deal with the reality that we face in real estate. Because real estate get rich quick is a very different game in reality than get rich slow. One of those has a much better track record and a lot less wreckage than the other. And this is why we're talking about this, is that as an investor, you need to be thinking about, how am I doing? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Am I basing what I'm doing on reality, the destination, the methods, the role models that I have, all these other things? We've got to stop and say, wait a minute, to what level is hyper reality interfering with my growth, my path, my destination, and the reasons for why
Exactly, my why. So I was just telling someone a story last night, and their response to the first part was, oh man, so you quit and you gave up? I was explaining that I had decided that every 2 years I'm going to learn a new sport and get really good at it. So I decided that for this set of 2 years, I'm going to get really good at pickleball. Playing, there's so many spots to play where I'm at in Florida. And there was one day where these older ladies looked at me and it was everyone could play and you mixed in depending on whose paddle was up. And they said, could you maybe not play this game so we can have a more competitive match? I play beach volleyball, and when you're playing 2-on-2, you do want the level for everyone there to be the same. And I said, oh, of course, yeah, I'll set this one out. And yes, if my why hadn't been that I'm going to learn and get really good at a new sport that I'm going to suck at first, then I would have just walked away and given up and tucked my tail and gone, okay, this isn't a sport for me. What did I do instead? While I was watching them play their game, waiting for my turn to come up, I'm literally on Facebook on all the pickleball forums of the area going, I need a pickleball coach who teaches blah, blah, blah. And I started vetting and I'm out in the process. I'm 4 of 10 sessions in, and I can proudly say that I have gone back to play pickup in between to see where the session, where it's all playing out. And I have definitely shown signs of improvement to where the people who kindly, again, very kindly, Dorothy, Martha, maybe Grace, whatever they were, they have even complimented and gone, wow, you played really solid today. So am I as good as them? Am I as consistent? No, not yet, but they've seen signs of progress. And the whole reason I put in the practice and did it was because my why was strong enough that I said, hey, I committed to getting really good at this sport over the next 2 years. So if I don't double down now, how am I ever going to get good?
It's jumping in and saying, I'm going to participate in this where I am right now. I can get better, but this is reality. Yeah, I live in Colorado, and I've got a friend of mine who lives up in Breckenridge, and he said he overheard a guy say to someone else, there was in the lift line, it was a teenager with his snowboard instructor. And the kid says to his snowboard instructor, this is a lot harder than the video game. It's like life is harder than the simulation of things. You got to put in work. You've sometimes got to have somebody older that you think I ought to be just walking all over them competitively. They're not, they're humbling us. And that's reality. That's part of reality. But the more we engage in that, the more we practice with it, the more okay we become with that, the freer it is, the more fun it is. It helps us get on our own journey instead of following someone else's journey. As we kind of wrap up here, a couple points that I've got, Kristi, you share some too. One is we think about reality, hyper reality. One, ask yourself, is this real? Is what I'm seeing, is what I'm consuming, is what I think I want real? And somewhere between being a pessimist and being just a straight up consumer of whatever gets served to you, be a little bit of a wise consumer. What's the point you've got, Kristi?
I think that because audience is the next industry, but it's authentic relationships with the audiences that your stuff doesn't have to go viral. It doesn't have to resonate with everyone out there. It just needs to be authentic to you, and the people who that relates to are going to understand it, because ultimately I want to be able to sleep at night. I don't want to live a life that isn't true online and then be a completely different person behind the scenes. For me, that would just be living an authentic truth, and who I am online is the same person I am in real life.
Absolutely. I think one of my points is slow growth. I do a little bit of woodworking, and I can tell you the trees that are grown now that you find at Home Depot and Lowe's, you might find 4 growth rings on a 2x4. And that's amazing, and that's sad, because old lumber, you take down an old house, anybody who does flipping, and they take down a house from the 50s or 60s, remove a wall, cut a 2x4, that 2x4 might have 50 or 60 growth rings in there. The short version of that is the slower it grows, the more stable and stronger it is. Now, I think that's a metaphor for where we are, but we don't want slow. We want fast. We want instant results. And friends, that does not make for strong lumber or strong portfolios or a strong inner growth.
And when people tell me, oh, I want that instant gratification, I said, I have learned patience. There's a reason I got so good at beach volleyball and snowboarding and soon to be pickleball because I just had to be patient being boring in the business side.
Yeah, it's an important practice. Well, thank you for walking with us through this topic on hyper reality and how that impacts us as people, as investors, because I want my portfolio, my life to be as close to reality and the reality that I want and my journey as possible. And it's so easy to get sucked into hyper reality, whether it's in the supermarket or whether it's watching a movie or whether that's looking through social media and other people's portfolios or what they're doing or whatever. It's so easy to get that wrong, and that can result in either financial disaster, because that's real, or just kind of a personal feeling of like, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. And those are all sad outcomes. We don't want that for you. We want you to engage in real life and be as satisfied as possible with that. You want to take us out, Kristi?
No, but you can.
She flipped that right back on me. All right. Well, I'll take us out. Thank you for being our guest on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing. And today, a little bit about life too. Thank you for joining us. If you found this valuable, please leave us a review. That's very helpful to us. Forward this to a friend. The more people that can listen to this, the more we can share with people. Thank you so much for being our guest. Please join us again on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast.